Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. And be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video.
So what was more impressive for you on Sunday? Was it Taysom's start or was it the defense?
Impressive, I'd say the defense, just because they took advantage of what was in front of them. A porous offensive line, and my gosh, they got after Matt Ryan. And it wasn't just the defensive front. It was linebacker play from Demario Davis. It was the secondary without Marshawn Lattimore. And I'll just reverse back to a couple of years ago when they were in Atlanta, week 3. And if you remember that game, it's when Drew Brees did like the spin touchdown, like insanity that if he did that now, he'd crack like 20 of his 22 ribs. And so that game, they did not know who Marshawn Lattimore should be defending because they had him on Julio. Calvin Ridley was burning them. Then they had to switch, and then they had to replace Ken Crawley and put in P.J. Williams, and P.J. was awful, and put Ken Crawley back in. And without Lattimore, they were able to really be very good in the back end, allowing the defensive front to get pressure on Matt Ryan. It was kind of a mix and match. And so I feel like that was more impressive than maybe Taysom Hill, even though Taysom Hill, obviously we're going to talk about. I'm not going to say he was super impressive, but he did about as well as you could have expected in that scenario.
All right, so we'll go to Taysom in a second, but let's stay on the defense. Where have you seen the most improvement, and do you have a reason for that improvement from their early season malaise this year?
Well, we could certainly point to the back end just because they were being beaten. They were having miscommunications. And just remember back, let's see, week 5 when they played the Chargers. I mean, the Saints, that's a game they should have won, and yet Patrick Robinson and P.J. Williams had a miscommunication. Then there's a deep ball, and then all of a sudden the Saints are in a hole and they're trying to get to overtime. And so I feel like on that sense, that the fact that part of the defense has improved, and you're seeing better coverage from Marshawn Lattimore, even though he didn't play. You're seeing good coverage from Jenkins. I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson has improved not only in coverage, but they're able to use him a little bit more. I think Malcolm Jenkins has improved. I think Marcus Williams has improved. And I think that unit, we've had so many questions just because they had so many players that have been in the league for a long time. I think it's that part because I always felt like the front, let's call it the front 6, I felt like that part was good and the back end was letting them down. Now they're kind of yin and yang and able to do things together. And we're really, especially the last 3 weeks, we're really starting to see where the dividends can come in.
All right, let's go to Taysom. Were you surprised how they chose to use Taysom in particular in the first half?
Yes, and yet it's taken me a minute just because after the game, for the story I wrote for The Athletic, I charted every play he did, how many times he was under center, shotgun, play action, design runs. His first design run wasn't until 4th and 2 when he ran for the touchdown. That was his first design run of the day, and that was drive 6. So he had 10 rushes, 6 were design runs, 3 happened in the last drive, and 1 was on a sneak. So the fact that they didn't run him as much was a little bit of a surprise, and yet, Matt, I'm seeing Sean Payton's thought process as I'm writing my story. The Falcons' pass defense is terrible. If Taysom Hill can't throw against that pass defense, then how can he legitimately feel good about Taysom Hill? He threw the ball well against that pass defense. It was sacked a few times, but that's okay. Look, that comes with the territory. But he was still 18 of 23. He threw some darts, and I feel like if he could not throw against that defense, he's not going to be able to throw against better pass defenses.
Yeah, the first sack wasn't his fault. I would say on the first drive of the game, the bigger surprise, Larry, is they had 3rd and 1, and they didn't run him. So do you think that was just Sean Payton starting his first start with Taysom Hill, wanting to establish the pass, and that what we saw in the second half is more likely what we'll see moving forward?
I do think it was part of that. And I don't think they wanted to just say, all right, we're going to do this, because even Sean said after the game that he felt like the Falcons had a pretty good rush defense. Well, in comparison to their terrible pass defense, I guess, if you want to look at it that way, I guess that's the way it is. But I'm not going to say that that's going to be the game plan totally going forward. It could change against Denver. It could change against Atlanta the next time they play them. But I think Sean wanted to see how Taysom did in passing situations. And I think how Taysom did, along with the way his teammates saw his performance after the game, that he was able to hang in the pocket, not take off immediately, one read, oh my gosh, I got to run. Like, that did not happen. And I think that bodes well for him moving forward in these next couple of games.
Larry Holder's with us, theathletic.com/New Orleans. He's on Twitter at Larry Holder. We haven't talked at all about Mike Thomas, who had a 100-yard receiving game and looks fully back to himself. Are you seeing the regular Mike Thomas, the all-pro Mike Thomas, back now?
I think so. It just depends on if Taysom can get him the ball going forward. I think he's back to himself, though. Like, it just depends on the game plan going forward. His numbers might not be what they are. I think they're just interested in getting wins, and then once Drew comes back, things get back to whatever. It doesn't matter. I just think they're interested in getting wins, but he did look more himself, and I do think that he liked having a game week of preparation with Taysom to work on some of those intermediate routes. I mean, some of those routes, all play action, they're deeper cross routes, and Taysom's putting it right on the money. And Michael Thomas talked about after the game how they worked on that, where to put the ball, where they expect him to be. And I did find it kind of humorous that when someone asked him about the drop, he didn't want to totally throw Drew Brees under the bus, basically saying that he throws the ball slightly without the same zip and that he wasn't expecting it. It was more on him. And so smart for Michael Thomas to do that. But still, I do think that a week of them just working together, and obviously they're working after practice and doing these things, that it certainly paid off.
The offensive line, we did see a little shifting, actually, with Pete going out of the game and Easton going to left guard. What's going on there, and how stable and steady are they across the offensive line?
I think Ruiz is an issue. Against stronger defensive lines, we've seen him struggle the past few weeks. Atlanta's defensive front is not very good. And we saw the week before Ruiz had troubles. I mean, that's where Drew Brees got hurt. A couple of weeks before that, he gave up 4 blown pass blocks against the Bears. I was almost thinking that Ruiz might be replaced by Nick Easton. But then Pete goes down, and, of course, that's when Easton comes in, this, that, and the other. Thank goodness they have Nick Easton. I mean, he's been really someone solid. And even in the games when everyone's healthy, they were rotating in. Easton, Ruiz. I found that really interesting. I'm curious to see if Pete can be healthy with his concussion, because how they would play it. But I do think at least they have good depth. You throw in James Hurst. I think they at least have good depth to really kind of figure this thing out if things kind of go awry with injuries.
Are you hearing anything as far as a realistic timeline for Drew Brees?
I've heard week 15. Now, he might come back a week earlier, but I've heard week 15. So that would put him another week after maybe the 3-week minimum. And look, Drew Brees, if he feels healthy, he's going to say, play me. And it's not like they're going to say no. And if he checks out, then they're going to play him. But I've been feeling and hearing week 15.
So week 15 would be Kansas City.
Well, that would be a good time as any to get him back in there as far as against the Kansas City Chiefs. But that's a primo game. But as far as NFC standings, it's not that big of a deal. But I think they'd like to see a heads up, mano-a-mano, if their full stack of slate could go against their full stack of slate.
Hey, before you go, do you have a thought on this Denver game? I talked about it in the first segment, Larry. It's so unfamiliar. The Broncos and the Saints have only played 11 times in their history. Saints haven't won in Denver since '94. Their only win in this series in Denver. I mean, they're favored, but it's just such an unfamiliar opponent. What do you think?
Well, remember the last game? It was the 2-point block. The field goal extra point was blocked, and they run it back for a 2-point conversion, and they win. Yeah, it's such a weird thing. And I feel like the last time they went to Denver, oh my gosh, that was bounty season. Joe Vitt was the head coach, and they played awful in Denver. I mean, that's how far back we're going. So it is certainly an unfamiliar opponent. They beat Miami, who was kind of on a roll, and now they actually win. And even though Drew Lock doesn't look great, it is a strange game. Like, you would assume the Saints could go in there and win. Overall, they're a better opponent, but it's a strange game. You're there. It's always a challenge when you play there. So, like, I would assume the Saints would win, but this is certainly one of those tricky matchups. I'd almost look at it now, 2020 vision, look back at Las Vegas. That was a tricky matchup, a trickier one than you thought. And so the Saints are a better team, but this is definitely a trickier matchup than you might imagine.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.